Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing a little what I eat in a week. Just a disclaimer before we get into like the rest of the video. My appetite has been really weird for like all of quarantine. I'll be fine for like a week, and then the next week for like 2 or 3 days I just like don't have an appetite, especially in the middle of the day. Like I'll wake up hungry and then I'm not hungry again till like 5 p.m. So some of my lunches are like really small or non-existent. I also don't really like lunch. I really like breakfast and dinner. The middle of the day, I don't care. So starting off on Monday, I had vanilla blueberry oats. I love oatmeal. It's been one of my food obsessions for like a few months now. I kind of changed how I've been eating breakfast since I filmed this. I try to eat smaller breakfasts now because I think that'll help me be hungrier in the middle of the day. But at this point I was doing a cup of oats, 2 cups of water, and then as it's cooking, put some cinnamon and vanilla in. I don't measure seasonings. I'm pretty sure I did a teaspoon of vanilla, but like cinnamon, I don't believe in measuring those seasonings. Seasonings come from the heart. Once it's done, I put it in a bowl. I personally really like my food to be pretty for no reason, so I spend too much time in the morning decorating my oatmeal. I do have a banana sliced, then whatever frozen fruit, obviously, since this was vanilla blueberry oats, I did frozen blueberries. On days when I don't use almond milk in the actual cooking of the oats, I always put coconut yogurt on it to add some more calcium. Top it with my favorite peanut butter and then add some chia seeds and you're all set. Every morning I have one of the Deva vegan multivitamin supplements. I believe this morning I also had peppermint tea. So then for lunch, because once again I don't care about lunch, I had basically breakfast part 2. I made a tofu scramble. I started by cooking down some mushrooms and tomatoes just with water in a saucepan. Then I added nutritional yeast to toast it. And you just have to keep stirring to make sure your nutritional yeast doesn't get stuck to the pan and burn. Then I crumbled my tofu up. You just break it apart into scrambled egg-like pieces. I added turmeric to give it a yellow color. I had a roasted red pepper that I had already cooked up that I threw in. Keep mixing it around to make everything all yellow. And then at the very end, I threw in spinach and just let it wilt down with the rest of it to get some greens in because I did not eat enough greens this week. I decided to put it on toast just to make it a little heartier and filling, and then I obviously added sriracha on top because, as you will see in this video, I eat a lot of spicy food. There's never too much sriracha or red pepper flakes or chili powder on anything for me. For dinner, I call them sweet potato pizza fries. I'm still working on like perfecting this, but I really like it. It's one of my favorite dinners. I start off by cutting up a sweet potato into matchstick slices. I throw them in a bowl with a little bit of olive oil, toss them around, just make sure everything's coated, and then put onion powder, garlic powder, and chili powder. Make them all evenly coated. Once again, I don't measure seasoning, so I don't know how much I use. And then put them in the oven on 450 for, I usually do somewhere between 25 and 30 minutes, depending on how thick the slices were, because I'm really bad at cutting potatoes evenly. I'll link the recipe down below, but I already had mozzarella made up. It's Nora Cooks' recipe for easy vegan mozzarella. It is so good. I love making it. It takes like 10 minutes and it's like a fun science project. But I had some of that already made up, so I take those fries, put them back on the baking sheet. I already warmed up some mozzarella in the microwave and then spread it across the fries that needed like a little more cooking. And then I add my toppings. I usually do mushrooms, roasted red pepper, tomatoes. If I have banana peppers, throw them back in the oven. Take them out, add the cheesy slices on top of all the other fries, and then of course I topped it with sriracha, red pepper flakes, and some Italian seasoning to give it the pizza-esque taste. Breakfast on Tuesday, I had chocolate cherry raspberry oats. These were so good. Same way I cooked them the day before, but instead of using vanilla and cinnamon, I put in cocoa powder, and then topped them with half a banana, some frozen cherries, frozen raspberries, coconut yogurt. Because I'm extra, I put a piece of chocolate right in the center so I could get my swipe for the melt video for my food stuff. Speaking of which, it should come as a surprise to no one that I'm enough of a narcissist to have an entire Instagram dedicated to my food. I'll leave it linked down below. I hate the username for it, so that might change. but it's there. And of course I had that with my peppermint tea and multivitamin. For lunch that day, I just heated up the leftover tofu scramble and some tortillas, and I threw some mashed up avocado and sriracha on them. For dinner, I made sweet potato nachos by cutting a big sweet potato up in the disc, but because it was so big, some of the pieces, like no chip would ever be that big of a circle, so I cut them into like really tiny triangles, so there's a weird mix of triangles and circles in here. Toss them in olive oil with the same seasonings as the day before, and then bake them, I'm pretty sure, on the same temperature. While those were in the oven, I made queso. I don't know what I did differently, but it was the best queso I've ever made, and it's the same recipe I always follow, but for some reason it tasted so much better this time. I think what it was is that I added onion powder, and I don't normally, so I guess it wasn't the same as I usually do. So to make this queso, it's so easy. 1 cup of cashews, 1 can of hot chilies, and a little bit of water, and then taco seasoning. At first, I only did half a cup of cashews because I was trying to make a smaller batch, but as I started blending only half a cup of cashews and then a whole can of chilies, it started turning a little green, and I didn't really want green queso, so I wound up putting in the whole cup of cashews. Once the sweet potato nachos were done, plate them, throw on some queso, jalapeno, avocado, sriracha, and red pepper flakes, I believe. Tomatoes, I don't think I got a clip of it, so oops, but I have a picture that I can insert. So for breakfast on Wednesday, I had oatmeal, of course. It was chocolate mixed berry oats, so same chocolate oats as the day before, but then I put on blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, banana, coconut yogurt, peanut butter, chia seeds, you get the point. I had a little bit of GT Dave's Trilogy kombucha and peppermint tea, and that was breakfast. For lunch that day, I was for some reason not hungry at all. I had to go to the farmer's market like Target, and I didn't want to be running on empty basically, so I had one of these Good and Gather apple pie bars. Those things are so good. Those have been one of my favorite quarantine snacks. That's all I had for lunch because I was just not hungry that day for some reason. For dinner, I had chili stuffed peppers. I never made stuffed peppers before. This chili recipe is the chili my family always made growing up. I believe it's from like a Pampered Chef cookbook. I just made it vegan by not putting ground beef in it. To make the chili, dice a large green pepper, onion, and garlic. Put them in a large sauce pot and let them evaporate a little for about 8 minutes. If you are gonna make this with meat, you should do it longer and include that in this step. After those are done, you're gonna stir in 1/3 of a cup of chili powder, which sounds like a lot, but I was fine with it and it's what the recipe said. Cook it for 1 minute and then add the liquid from a can of kidney beans. After that, stir in a can of tomatoes, tomato paste, water, salt, sugar, and a bay leaf over high heat and let it boil, and then cover it and let it simmer on low for 45 minutes. After it's done, you're gonna add in the kidney beans, and if you're like me and wanted it hotter, I added some chipotle powder. Cover it again just to let everything blend together for about 15 minutes and let it simmer, and then take out the bay leaf. While the chili was cooking, I cut off the tops and de-seeded 2 peppers. To soften them, I put them in boiling water for I think about like 5 to 10 minutes. Once the chili was done, I put them inside the peppers, covered them with aluminum foil. I put them in the oven on 375 for 15 minutes just to let it all cook together, and then when it was done, I topped it with some of the leftover queso. I at first only had one, but then I was sitting there FaceTiming my family and I was like, I never eat lunch, I'm still kind of hungry, so I had the second one too. For breakfast the next morning, I was really tired of looking at the tofu scramble still sitting in my fridge, so I had tofu scramble tacos again with leftover queso and sriracha, some kombucha, and peppermint tea. For lunch that day, I had leftover chili with half of one of Trader Joe's teeny tiny avocados sliced on top, and I believe more peppermint tea because I just really love peppermint tea. I actually had an appetite this day because I wound up having a little afternoon snack. I had some coconut yogurt with raisins and cinnamon, very basic, but I really like it. For dinner that day, I had one of my new favorite dinners of Mexican stuffed sweet potatoes. A lot of recipes say to bake sweet potatoes for like 45 minutes. For some reason in my oven, or with my really big sweet potatoes, they do not cook in 45 minutes. So I do it, I believe, on 400 for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Cooked up some black beans. I seasoned them with chili powder, cumin, onion powder, and garlic powder. I cooked up some frozen peppers and added some chopped mushrooms and then let them saute, and added more of the taco seasoning. Once the sweet potato's done, cut it in half. If you're an idiot like me, you cut the sweet potato straight through the middle, so that way you can't actually put the toppings in it without it falling apart. I added more of the leftover queso and some red pepper flakes, and it was very tasty. even if I did mess it up. While my roommate and I were watching all of the DComs on Disney Plus with one or both of the Panabaker sisters in them, I had 2 rice cakes with peanut butter and raisins. On Friday, I wound up having basically my same like chocolate mixed berry oats as I had before, and I also didn't eat breakfast till really late that day. Like, I don't think I was eating till like 11:30, so I didn't have lunch that day. I had more of a brunch. And then for dinner, I made pizza, and it was so good. I used Trader Joe's broccoli and kale pizza crust. This is usually the crust I use when I make pizza. So to make that, this angle kind of sucks that I got because you can't really see what I'm doing. I didn't have pizza sauce, so I used just like Prego marinara sauce. Spread that around and then added chopped mushrooms, spinach, tomato, some of that roasted red pepper, and then I added dollops of that leftover mozzarella. Before I put in the oven with all the toppings on it, I spray the mozzarella with a little bit of vegetable oil because it makes it brown like normal mozzarella. I started with only 3 slices of that pizza. I went back for a 4th because it was so good. I found this Kado ice cream at Target that's made from avocado instead of like coconut milk or whatever. I really like it. This one was mint chocolate chip. I like it because my roommate recently pointed out to me that I like all of my food really thick. Like, I want my oatmeal, any soup or sauce, like I like everything really thick. And the fat from the avocado makes this ice cream really thick. Saturday morning, I had a smaller bowl of oats than I usually do, and I made oats that I had never made before. These were strawberry cream oats. Instead of using water, I used almond milk to cook my oats. I did half a cup of oats and a whole cup of almond milk. While those were cooking, I added vanilla and frozen strawberries that I had heated up in the microwave, and then kind of mashed the strawberries into the oats as they were cooking. Then I topped them with half a banana, a fresh strawberry, coconut yogurt, peanut butter, and chia seeds. And I of course had it with some green tea and kombucha. For lunch that day, I had the 2 leftover slices of pizza from the night before, along with some yogurt, a kiwi, and frozen grapes. I had dinner very late that night, and I wound up just eating all that was left over of that chili with some queso. Sunday morning, I was apparently feeling very autumnal, and I wanted some pumpkin pancakes with all the fall-y sort of toppings. So I started off by making almond butter. For some reason, I buy peanut butter. I cannot justify buying almond butter. I'm like, I can just make it myself at home. I had almonds I had already roasted and then put them in a food processor with some cinnamon. When you're making almond butter, at first, when you are blending them, it'll just be a powder and you're thinking you're doing everything wrong, but if you just keep blending, it eventually turns into almond butter. So once I got it to the consistency that I liked, I then cut up an apple and let it cook down with some cinnamon to make it soft to top on my pancakes later. While those were cooking, I made my pancakes. I make my pancakes with the 3-ingredient recipe that everyone on Instagram acts like they invented. I don't know who originally came up with this, but it's half a cup of oats, half a banana, and splashes of almond milk as needed to thin it out a little. Since they were pumpkin pie oats, I added half a cup of canned pumpkin and then some pumpkin pie spice. I blended that up. I wound up adding more almond milk than I had originally just because it was a little too thick. Pour the mixture in a saucepan and cook them as you cook pancakes. So once those were done, I topped them with those cooked apples, almond butter, crushed walnuts, and a few dried cranberries and maple syrup. Those pancakes turned out so well. I think the banana that I used was really ripe. I used the perfect amount of almond milk that made everything so creamy. It tasted like pumpkin pie cheesecake. And then I had it, of course, with peppermint tea. For lunch that day, I did a little bit of meal prepping. I wanted a Buddha bowl, but I was like, I know I'm gonna want some later in the week and I'm not gonna do this every single day. So I started out by cooking up some frozen Brussels sprouts and broccoli and dicing a sweet potato. I put the sweet potato in a bowl with some olive oil and some chili powder and mixed them up. And then I put the broccoli and Brussels sprouts in another bowl and coated them in balsamic vinegar. At the last minute, I decided to bake some chickpeas with them, and those are seasoned with chili powder as well. And they're just really awkwardly thrown onto the baking sheet. While all the vegetables were baking, I made some hummus because I also borderline refuse to buy store-bought hummus because I feel like I can just make it myself. So I put a can of chickpeas, a clove of garlic, some lemon juice, olive oil, and cumin into a food processor, started blending, and then I was like, I usually make spicy hummus with like red pepper flakes and sriracha mixed in, but I was like, oh, I have that roasted red pepper in the fridge that I kind of wanted to get rid of. So I threw a few slices of that in there with some red pepper flakes and blended it. Oh my god, Sabra hummus, I'm coming for your gig. That was the best hummus I've ever made. Maybe I should start measuring seasoning so I know like that queso and this hummus. I don't know what I did. Once the vegetables were done, I poured some spinach in a bowl. I usually throw some lemon juice on my spinach for some reason, I don't know. Then I put all the vegetables and chickpeas on it. I added some sliced avocado and tomato as well. Then some hemp seed, everything but the bagel seasoning, and red pepper flakes. And then some hummus in the center and sriracha, obviously. Later that afternoon, I was still a little hungry, so I just had a very boring snack of yogurt and a kiwi with a few of these Trader Joe's contemplates inner peas. These are so good. Those and the apple pie bars are my favorite snacks. I don't like greasy, salty things, so I like kind of wipe off the salt that's on them, but they're so good. For dinner that night, I made something I had never made before. It was supposed to be like a pumpkin Alfredo sort of thing, but I didn't follow a recipe and I didn't feel like doing what I had originally planned, which was like using cashews and everything to make like a really creamy sauce with pumpkin. I was tired of looking at my food processor and blender that day, so I was like, we're just gonna mix something else up. I always use Bonza pasta. I just prefer gluten-free pasta, and I really like this one because it has more protein. To another pot, I added half a cup of canned pumpkin, a third of a cup of almond milk, some nutmeg, which I accidentally used way too much of. I only wanted like a little bit, but I just kind of poured it over and like a bunch came shooting out. Some nutritional yeast. I wound up adding a lot more nutritional yeast than was originally shown here because of how much nutmeg I accidentally put in it, and I wanted it to be more cheesy, so to balance it out I had to just throw in a lot of nutritional yeast. And then I mixed that around. I just kind of kept tasting it. I wanted it really thick and creamy, obviously, and just kind of kept adding more nutritional yeast as I tasted it. And then at the very end, I added spinach to wilt. Whenever I eat pasta, I either eat it on a bed of spinach or I cook spinach into the sauce because it's just an easy way to get greens in. Once that was all mixed up, I added the pasta into it and topped it with some chipotle powder. I honestly probably added more than I meant to, but it was still really good. This probably would have been even better if I had like actually done what I originally thought or made it a pasta bake, but I didn't feel like doing that either. I was going very low effort here. For dessert that night, we're closing this out with a really exciting dessert of 2 rice cakes with almond butter, raisins, and 2 prunes on the side. And that was what I ate this week. I'm just impressed with myself for not having sweet potatoes every night, because in a perfect world, I would just have oatmeal for breakfast and sweet potatoes for dinner pretty much every day. Let me know if you guys are interested in food videos. I know I should just make whatever I like to make, and I really like making food videos, but I don't know if other people really care, and I don't want to like only make food videos. If you like this video, comment down below, like, and subscribe. I'll leave all my links in the description if you want to follow me, and I'll see you guys in the next video.